Out of nowhere, we got the demo for Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince. Though I wouldn't say out of nowhere because in the Japanese version of the Nintendo Direct, they announced that a demo will be coming for Japanese customers. While for us, it was just a shallow drop out of nowhere, with no indication this demo was coming other than a tweet from the Dragon Quest Twitter account. And Square Enix wonders why none of their games meet their sales expectations. Imagine my shock. Though aside from that, I would say Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince is a relatively fun time. If you like turn-based battles, if you like monster collecting, you're going to enjoy Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince. And for today, I'm going to give you guys my first impressions on the game, about 2 hours I played of this demo, and overall what I think about the game and whether or not you should give this game a try. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So for the most part, the demo is relatively fun. You're going out collecting monsters or grinding with your monsters, you're going to tournaments and finding people in tournaments, and you're also experiencing a bit of a story. And I would say the start of the game is a little bit of a slow start. I wouldn't say as bad as Dragon Quest Treasures where the tutorials were straight up boring to do, but I would say the game is very dialogue heavy at the beginning. There's a lot of talking, a lot of plot dumping when it comes down to the story of who Sorrow is and what's going on in this game's universe. So I would say yeah, there's a little bit of a slow start because of dialogue rather than boring tutorials. Though that's not to say the beginning of the game is tutorial heavy, because they do go through a lot of mechanics of this game and tell you how everything works in the overworld. And let's talk about those game mechanics. Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince basically plays like the modern monster games from Joker 1 and 2 and the remakes on Nintendo's 3DS, where you command 4 monsters on the field, though you start with 1, and you command them to attack monsters, defeat them, or weaken them enough so you can try to capture the monsters through scouting. And scouting basically gives you a chance of capturing the monster based on percentage. If it's 100%, you're guaranteed to catch it. If it's 0, yeah, you ain't catching it. Though if you're lucky enough, you can actually fight brilliantly as the game claims. The monster will be willing to join you regardless if you did scouting or not, akin to the older monster games. So there's 2 ways of catching monsters, one of them's more RNG based than the scouting option, but the option's there nonetheless. And battling is pretty straightforward. Monsters choose what attacks they do to go up against the monster, though you can dictate what they can do from tactics like show no mercy, weaken the enemy, support allies, focus on healing, or just not use MP when attacking. Though you can also be specific on what attacks you want your monsters to do. If you want them to defend, attack, use their magic spells, so on and so forth. The game definitely gives you a lot of options to choose from, and if you feel the battles are taking a bit too long, you can actually speed up the game to fast. Or, if you don't want to do anything, just have it auto battle. And during battles, you can also use the items to help heal your monsters, or try to attract the monster to join your team. So overall, nothing too much to say about the battling and capturing system, other than the fact that you can hold 8 monsters at a time, though you can only have 4 on the battlefield, while 8 essentially get benched. If you catch more monsters than the 8 you already have, they'll be transferred over to the Monster Depot, and they give you the option to switch between your monsters if you want to have that monster on your team right then and there. Though having 4 monsters on the battlefield is not entirely true, as you can also capture bigger monsters and have them join your team, and they actually fill out 2 spots. So you can either have 4 monsters on the battlefield, though they have to be small, or you have to compensate and have 1 large monster, though in the sacrifice of taking out 1 monster, but the benefit of having 1 large monster that can deal more damage. Aside from that, exploring the overworld is also unique as well, as rather than a day and night system, Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince introduces a season system where every once in a while the season will change to a different time, and it affects the terrains around the area and the type of monster you see in the overworld. In the summertime, you can climb up vines and explore higher up areas, while in the fall, you can actually crash through these leaves and find items and scatter around, though at the sacrifice of climbing up vines. In the winter, everything freezes up, including water, so you can now cross around the water, or when waterfalls freezes up, they might reveal a cave that you can actually go in and explore. And in the springtime, petals start blooming, and large flowers start flowing around that you can use to traverse around the world. They definitely give you a lot of options, and also on top of that, different monsters do spawn in different seasons. It's definitely a good evolution of the day and night system that I sort of wish more and more RPGs use. And moving on, tournaments do make a return in Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince. I think the last time from what I've heard, tournaments were in Dragon Quest Monsters was in the first Dragon Quest Monsters on Game Boy, and of course later in the remake. I'm not entirely sure on that, so if you guys know, let me know down in the comments below, as I'm not entirely sure. And they basically work like Dragon Quest Monsters on the Game Boy, where You start at rank G and you make your way up to rank A and maybe S, double S, triple S, or X, because I know Dragon Quest VIII had that. And the way it works is you go up against 3 monster wranglers and you beat each one of them and you move up a rank and you get some rewards. Lose, either you need to grind or try your luck again. The one change they made to the tournament system, because I know this for a fact because I played the Game Boy one and I played Dragon Quest VIII, was before, if one of your monsters bit it in battle, yeah, tough shit right there, you had to deal with the fact that you lost one party member and you're moving on to the next battle without that party member. But in Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince, they changed it to where if you win a battle and you progress to the next battle and one of your monsters die or they lose health, they will actually go out their way to revive party members or heal them up to full health and full MP for the next battle. Though I wouldn't say it's a complete crutch in easiness, because when you move on to the next rank, things definitely do get progressively hard, and I actually did lose the final battle in rank F. And saving, there's autosave, and also you can save at any time as well. And even after 2 hours, to be honest, I don't even feel like I'm scratching the surface on all the things you can do in this game. I haven't gone into the monster fusing stuff yet, nor have even bothered going to the store and seeing what they have to offer. So for sure, this is definitely an easy to learn game, but at the same time, you also need to put in some work, meaning grinding. Because much like many other Dragon Quest games, grinding is definitely necessary to grow your monsters and actually progress through the game. And now let's talk about overall control of the character, because I thought this game was getting control much similar to Dragon Quest Treasures, seeing how the game was being developed by Tosei again. Which, to be fair, Tosei has worked on the previous Dragon Quest Monster games. But to my surprise, Sorrow controls a bit stiff. I wouldn't say he's a plank of wood or anything like that, but I definitely noticed how stiff Sorrow controlled in comparison to how Eric controlled in Dragon Quest Treasures. Or hell, even the Luminary from Dragon Quest XI. Though I would say it doesn't really matter much because of the fact this game is a turn-based game and there's not really much platforming involved, or any kind of action combat. And now moving on, we have the graphics and performance of this game. And I have to say, this game looks pretty good. It looks a lot better than Dragon Quest Treasures in my opinion, and like I said, mostly has to do with that cel-shaded look. But what I did notice is the game can be a bit blurry at some times, especially when looking at faraway objects or monsters. But one thing I started learning more about Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince is indeed that performance. The first time I noticed the performance issues was with faraway enemies, as they seem to be walking around 15 to 20 frames per second, and I saw a video online looking at the frame rate performance of the game, and apparently this game could chug at times, running at 20 to 25 frames per second. The only thing I've noticed in regards to performance drops has been in a few instances where it randomly just drop a little bit and then it'll move back up to 30 frames per second. It was a little bit rare for me, more so happened in the overworld, though I would say at the very least, because this is a turn-based game, a game that's not too reliant on frame rates, it doesn't really bother me too much that the frame rate is running around 20 to 25 frames per second at times. Would I prefer it to be a stable 30 frames per second? Absolutely. But it's not a full necessity for this game to run at 30 frames per second, and I'm pretty sure whenever this gets a PC port, this game will run a lot more consistently. But at the very least, I do hope whenever we get to the final release of Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince, this game gets optimized to at least run more stably at 30 frames per second. And now moving on, we have the music, which once again is MIDI music again, but I was much more surprised of the music choices used for Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince. Because typically in a spin-off game, Square Enix would normally just throw in any kind of music for Dragon Quest into the spin-off itself, and just throw any kind of mainline Dragon Quest music in there, even if the spin-off is focusing on a character from one particular mainline Dragon Quest game. But for Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince, they've mostly just used music from Dragon Quest IV. When you go up against wild monsters in the overworld, it plays the battle music from Dragon Quest IV. So far, the overworld music has been Ragnar's theme, and hell, Sorrow's theme plays at one point. That definitely has me in shock because typically they've never had that constraint. And here we are with this game, and they're constraining themselves to only use music from Dragon Quest IV. Though that's not entirely true because when you're in the monster arena and you go up against the opponents, they actually do play the monsters battle theme there and the boss theme as well. But so far, aside from the spin-off music, I haven't heard any other music from other mainline Dragon Quest games. Unless you count the Overture, I guess. Intermission time, because I just recently beat the demo for Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince, and I'm gonna get those thoughts out just so you guys get a little bit more of an updated thoughts on this game from myself. So I did get to the point where you can fuse monsters, and the way it works is that you have to have monsters above level 10 in order to fuse them up. Both monsters have to be level 10. And when you start fusing them up, they actually give you an array of options of which monsters you can fuse based on the monsters that you choose. And so far I managed to fuse 2 monsters. I got a Furrow Slime and a Robber Rabbit. And I definitely know for sure I'm going to make a lot of use for the monster fusing, because there's a lot of monsters I want to fuse and get particular monsters. And secondly, you may already notice it already in the video because I put a note while editing. But yeah, in terms of the large monsters so far, you can't actually scout any of the larger monsters at this moment in time in the demo. I'm assuming they only expect you to play through the story. And also on top of that, there's also more than just one tournament. There's a monster tournament down in Nadiria, which you actually go up against some monster wranglers that are actual monsters. Assuming slavery is not a problem there down in Nadiria. So not only you have one tournament to go through, but also another tournament as well. And regarding music, I was completely wrong that Square Enix constrained themselves, because by the time I got to the final area in the demo, they started playing music from other mainline Dragon Quest games. So there you go right there, but at least for the majority of the demo, they mostly played music from Dragon Quest IV. And finally, seeing how I completely forgot to mention this, the voice acting. For English, it's pretty fine. There's some voices I get annoyed by, particularly Rose. I just don't like her voice, in my opinion. While the Japanese voices I tend to prefer, but that's just because I'm a filthy weeb. So those are my thoughts on the voice acting there, and now back to your scheduled programming. And now finally, let's talk about the story itself. Because I have one new idea about the story, that it might not just be a prequel to Dragon Quest IV, but it can also be a retelling of Dragon Quest IV as well, from Sorrow's perspective. We already know this is basically a prequel to the game because of the newer design of Sorrow, but from the recent Nintendo Direct, at least in Japan, we saw some more interesting things about Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince, as we see the party members from Dragon Quest IV standing alongside Solo, in a very familiar area that I'm not entirely sure if it's the exact area, but it definitely gave me those vibes. And I'm not going to spoil it for people who haven't played Dragon Quest IV, because if that scene does exist, it does tell me eventually it will grow from being a prequel to Dragon Quest IV to becoming a retelling of Dragon Quest IV from Sorrow's perspective. And that definitely has me excited there. I already like the idea that it was starring Sorrow in the first place, but if it's a retelling, then I'm already hyped for that. So those are my thoughts on Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince. Overall, I think this is a pretty good Dragon Quest Monsters game. It has everything you need from turn-based combat, it has the tournament system from Dragon Quest Monsters and Dragon Quest VIII. Once again, let me know if the other Dragon Quest Monsters games have this mechanic. And while I think there is indeed a slow start with all the dialogue in the beginning of the game, and the fact there's some performance issues with the game as well, I wouldn't ultimately say that those are major deterrences, because the slow start only is about 10 to 20 minutes. While the performance issues, at the end of the day, this is a turn-based game. You don't really need a consistent frame rate. And the story speculations have me running wild. I'm probably sure Dragon Quest Monster fans are already playing this demo, while for any regular Dragon Quest fans, I definitely say give this a try, and for any other monster collecting fan, especially of the Pokemon variety, I also say give this game a try. It's a little bit different from Pokemon, but I think you'll enjoy this game nonetheless. So definitely give Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince a try. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and if you like this video, you should definitely check out these videos here. I think you'll enjoy them and get a good kick out of those. See you guys on the next one. Take care.